He writes, now the Shabbos Goyim are gone. This is now the Shabbos Goyim are gone. The atmosphere has returned to its normal kosher self. All is well again. Nothing to complain about. God bless the righteous. Amen.
The thunderstorm passed away.
They stirred the religious pot in St. Louis, Missouri, the Austrian champions at the time. The assistant professor of football has never done anything on Spain. I'm not today either. I don't know. I've never had a close connections to Spanish football, but that will soon be amended. I'll be sitting down with someone this coming week who can help me. In fact, if there's any club in La Liga that actually fits this podcast, that's the one we'll be talking about. You might know which one. For today, though, you are in for a bit of a companion episode to the often referred and semi-famous episode 24 from fall last year. That was the one about Matthias Sindelar, legendary Austrian player in the 1930s, who allegedly was the secret resistance fighter against the Nazis, danced provocatively in front of them, and was even killed by them. Except none of this is actually very likely to be true. As David Forster told us back then in great detail, Austrian historian. Even if many corners of the internet today want to tell you it is true, it's, of course, a very self-serving myth for Austrians, right? And for football anti-fascists, too, that there's the secret resistance guy, and Austria was the first and foremost a victim of Hitler. But rather than myths, I prefer discussing historical realities here. And our story today is a historical reality with a lot of tragedy and a lot of hope in it as well. It's the story of Hakoach Vienna, the Jewish club that became Austrian champion in 1925. Then right after lost its important players to North America, was home to Bela Guttman in Austria, and was shut down 3 days after the Anschluss of Austria to Hitler Germany. It lives on today in at least 3 clubs on 3 continents. One of them is a reformed Hakoach in Vienna itself. Marcus Patka is here to tell the story. He's a historian, archivist, curator at the Jewish Museum of Vienna, which, by the way, ran an unrelated other exhibit on soccer very recently as well, by the way. That was excellent. And Marcus is in charge there of whatever is left of Hakoach-related materials from the interwar years at the museum. I think this is also the time now to do something that I really don't want to do. Let me be blunt about something. This podcast is downloaded, well, a lot of times, each episode. Only 11 of you have taken the second, for example, to rate on Apple Podcasts. Or fill in any other podcast platform. The number of likes and comments is very small compared to how many of you I know enjoy every or almost every episode. Please do me the favor to rate and subscribe and comment. It really doesn't take a lot of your time. It costs nothing, and it really helps. Whenever I hear podcasters or YouTubers or whatever tell you like and subscribe, I know it kind of sounds superfluous because, I'm listening already. But since I'm doing this, I know those things help a lot with visibility and algorithm and reach. There are hundreds more of you that listen to every episode, but have never rated or commented anywhere. Please change that now. Thank you so much. I hate doing this. I hope I don't have to do this regularly. What I love doing is this. Hakoach Vienna. What a story. And you'll hear an incomplete version of it on this podcast. Please consult the links in the show notes for more and longer research. There are at least 2 very, very nice English-speaking research articles out there as well. You will note that I first kept pronouncing the club, by the way, without the ch at the end, because that's kind of Austrian German. I always used to say Hakoah Vienna. And you'll also notice I had a bit of a cold when we recorded, Marcus and I, but I trust I don't sound too terrible. Enjoy. Wonderful. Welcome, Marcus. And greetings to the old home. Greetings to Vienna.
Yes. Hi, Philip. This is Marcus from Vienna. Welcome to all of you from the Jewish Museum of Vienna. I'm working here as a curator since the year 1998. There were times before the 2000 years. And I'm a historian of contemporary. I'm a scholar of contemporary history, and I also studied German literature. But you see, my job is as a curator is mainly to create temporary exhibitions, which last between 4 and 6 months. And but also we have a big archive. We have a collection of 3-dimensional items, ritual objects, of course, and what is left from the Jewish community up to 1938. And you see, the museum was in this form. There was the first Jewish museum in Vienna in the time between the wars. And it was reestablished in 1993 in a new building by the Viennese mayor, Helmut Zilk, who did a lot of efforts for that. And he made a contract also with the Jewish community so that their whole collection of ritual objects is located now in our museum. During the times, we also, of course, started to collect archival material. And we also have a large section on sports, as sports was very eminent among the Jewish population up to 1938. You see, in those times, sports was very different from what it is today because it was completely political. A club had a political goal.
Yes, we'll get to all of that. Okay, let me just ask you briefly. Okay. Do you have a personal connection to sports or football in particular?
Yes,
any background there in your biography?
Well, you see, at the age of, I was about 12 when Hans Krankel scored in Cordoba against Germany, and we win, which was very astonishing that we did that in the World Championship. And
yes, but should we explain this to the American viewers, why this goal is so important to Austrian football history?
You see, we are the smaller brothers, and all the smaller nations around Germany, also the Czechs and the Danes and the Netherlands, they always compete with the bigger neighbor. And of course, as Germany is a kind of world power in football, it's always something special when you win against them, which happens approximately every 50 years. Well, in the case of Austria. And so this was quite something. And some people even say, some historians say that this was the beginning of the Austrian nation, because then we did not feel Germans anymore.
The inferiority complex of Austrians when it comes to Germans, particularly in football, is it's a thing. It's a what? It's a thing. It's
a thing. Yes, of course.
Essential in many ways. Yes. And here comes this World Cup in Argentina, and the Austrian forward Hans Krankel, a legend of Rapid Vienna, scores the winning goal. Austria didn't go far in that tournament or anything, but we did beat Germany, and that's worth a lot. So that was your coming of age moment.
That was my initiation to the magic of football. Then I became a fan of Rapid Wien, of course. And when I was 19 or 20, I went to look for some games. Then we had a good team, but later on I lost a little bit the enthusiasm and, of course, the time. Today I don't watch football. I watch football only when it's a very important game at this level, so to say. And I also played football a little bit for some years in my early 20s with some friends, but once I was injured so badly that I had to stop, and now I just go swimming or bicycling, and that's my attitude to sports, yes.
Okay. Well, at least you're reasonably healthy, and Rapid is starting this season well, I'm noticing.
Yes, after years of suffering, this year, at least in the beginning, it looks much better. And we had a couple of victories in the last games, and so we hope that it will go on. Yes.
Yeah, including against my Sturm Graz. First round of the championship.
Well, all right, but you're the champion, so you can live with that.
Yes. So we're the unlikely champions. Never rest on those laurels. It'll be a hard season for us this season.
Yes, that's true.
I'm sure. Well, you already said sports is different in the time period that we're talking about. So let's travel back to that time. period. We are in the years before World War One.
Yes.
Football is increasingly popular in Vienna, and it will become, in the time between the two wars, something that Austria is actually fairly famous for. And in those years, we have how many Jews living in Vienna, would you say?
Well, in the time between the wars, up to 200,000, yes.
Among those arises the idea of having a sport club for Jewish members. Begs the question first, especially in times of sports clubs emphasizing ethnic diversity. Why? What's the context, and why do these Jewish students end up founding a club? And we'll get to the football section and to the successes later.
Okay.
But what's the beginning idea of having a club in the first place in this?
Okay. Let's start with this. You see, in 19th century, there was no sports in public. There were no teams. In Germany, there was Turnen, which was gymnastics. I mean, but this was something very German, of course, to fit and make your body fit. And the legend goes in Vienna that it was the Rothschild family who employed gardeners from Great Britain, from England, and they started to play football on the meadows in the garden of the Rothschilds on the Hohe Warte. And then the guy said, okay, I give you your own playground. And so he created the stadium at Hohe Warte. And so, and he created the first Vienna football club. It still has this English name because it was an English game. And then slowly it became more popular, but still it was not before World War One. It was seen as maybe more brutal and proletarian. Yeah. There were articles in the newspapers. Don't let your boys go there because they will become criminals because this is rude and sports is no good for you. And,
right. And it's not only don't let your boys watch it. It's also don't let your boys play this, right? I mean, it's brutalizing the players as well.
Yeah. Don't go there. Don't play and don't watch. And this is it was also, and so of course by this it was a kind of generation conflict, and that by this it became more popular among young people. And so the more bourgeois, they mixed up with the more workers class people and so on. And so this was very interesting for them as well. And why was there a Jewish sport clubs founded in 1909 in Vienna? You see, there was a lot of anti-Semitism everywhere, and all this kind of Vereine, you can see unit or unifications, they didn't want to have Jewish members. They were excluded. Sometimes it was written in the script. Sometimes it was just a silent understanding among the members. And that's why wherever you had a kind of unit, there sooner or later there started a parallel Jewish unit because they were not allowed to enter the main one.
So I have to insert here quickly. The Rothschild family that kind of stands patron over the founding of First Vienna is a Jewish family.
Yes.
The Vienna, though, doesn't have a market set apart Jewish identity ever, does it?
It was never presented as a Jewish club. Only when you look back, of course, you had the famous Rothschild family, and they donated millions of whatever was the currency then. They really did. They created hospitals and old people homes and things like this. So it was just a small thing also to create a football club, and that run by itself later on.
Yeah. How did the exclusion that you just mentioned look like? Are there paragraphs in the club's constitution that say we don't accept Jews, or is it more an informal, we don't hang out with Jews, so don't bother coming to training?
Both. Yeah. I mean, you see that there were some of them where some of these units were explicit anti-Semitic, and there was anti-Jewish paragraph, so to say. And some others, it was a kind of silent understanding that they don't want to have Jewish members or to hang out with Jews. And yes, Hakoah started like in 1909. You see later on, because also there was the silent understanding not to have Jewish sportsmen and sportswomen in the national team. They were not sent to the Olympic Games. And so that was the reason why the kind of parallel Maccabi games were created in the late 1920s. But they did not have football games. It was more athletics and swimmings and all that. And they took part in Tel Aviv and but also in Eastern Europe, in Banska Bystrica, they had a skiing. They had winter games. Okay, but coming back to football. You see Hakoach Vienna. The most famous section of Hakoach Vienna, of course, is the football section, because in the season of 1924-25, they did win the national championship. And worldwide, it was the first and maybe only time that a kind of pure Jewish team was winning a national championship. And that's why it became so extremely popular in those days. But of course, the Hakoach was a much wider sports club. The swimming section was extremely important and very successful in Austria in the championships, but also on an international level. They had a handball and they had hockey and they had an athletics, of course, running and jumping and all these things. What was interesting that also the football players took part in the athletic games sometimes, because it was like that you went to many sports, kind of sports in this club. But coming back to the political aspect, you see the situation, of course, changed after World War I, because first of all, the anti-Semitism changed, because before World War I, it was, how to say, the Jews were a kind of minority among many other ones in the Habsburg Empire, because they were the Hungarians and the Bohemians and lots of little minorities.
Lots of ethnic groups with their own ideas of national
and religious groups, yeah. Yes. But during World War I, at the end, a scapegoat was needed, because those circles who created the war after the war had the problem to explain why the war was started and lost, and why there was a loss of territories in the East. And so they created a scapegoat, and that was the Jewish Bolshevistic Freemasonic conspiracy and all these things. And from that point of view, anti-Semitism changed a lot. The moment when the Habsburg family left Vienna, there came such a strong and severe anti-Semitic wave of German nationalistic background over Vienna with many posters and things like this. And since then, you really had this kind of racial anti-Semitism, and you really have the pamphlets. Maybe they were less than in the time before, but they were, how to say, more. They were looking for destruction in their language and killings, and you could see that.
Yeah.
And so in the time between the wars, sports was very political, which means when you look to football, there was Rapid Vienna and there was the Grazer Athletic Club, and they were from the working class. They were kind of proletarian. On the other side, you had the Wiener Sportclub and Sturm Graz, and they were Christian social. They were, so to say, from the Christian bourgeois political section.
Right, as a Sturm fan.
Yes, please.
I'm not. We might have to look this up at some point. But as a Sturm fan, the roots of the GAK are not in the working class, but among students, and particularly the bourgeois section in Graz. We may have different sources we're drawing from there, okay. But I'm not sure if the Graz clubs aren't a little bit upside down here.
We make an agreement. I speak for Vienna and you speak for Graz.
Okay? Yes, however. by the time World War I is over,
Yes.
I mean, a lot of people are dead. And I'm assuming that players of Hakoach were drafted into the army as well. How does the club come out of this war? It's not one of the big successful clubs yet. Does it emerge pretty stronger than before? Does it emerge weakened?
They probably they had to wait for a few years. I mean, of course, this loss of young men was a problem for all the clubs, also for all the others, not only for Hakoach. But you see, they first played in third division and then in second division, and then in the early 20s they moved to the first division. And in 1923, I mean, this was the first miracle, so to say. They went to Great Britain, the motherland of football, and they bet West Ham 5-0,
yes,
which was a sensation then.
Yeah, at Upton Park.
Yes.
So that's a very famous game. Until we get there, though, so Hakoach is still exclusively Jewish players in those successes, or have they opened up as well? And second question is, aren't there other Jewish sport clubs in Vienna? And weren't there other? I mean, there's the SK 1908, which is a little rivalry going on there with Hakoach early on. How is the relation to other Jewish clubs?
What is very, very important to say about Hakoach, it was a Zionist club. I mean, you see the Jewry in those times was kind of divided in three big groups. It was the Zionists, it was the assimilated ones, and it was the Orthodox. Of course, the Orthodox were not interested in sports. And so the Zionists had Hakoach Vienna, and the more bourgeois assimilated Jews, they had Austria. And so, or let's say mainly the management, the trainers, and they were Jewish. And so also Austria Wien has a Jewish history.
Yes.
But Hakoach was Zionist, and of course the Zionist movement improved a lot after World War I. There was the Balfour Declaration in 1917, and so then it grew much stronger. And you see, it was purely Jewish. I mean, once I even saw a member card, and there is a paragraph that you have to be Jewish to become a member. What is important? They hired half of the team of MTK Budapest. This is, so to say, the legend. They were the first ones who bought legionnaires, from another team to get stronger. The most important one is Bela Guttman, who later on also became a trainer at Real Madrid after the war.
Yes. When we speak about Zionism in this context, we speak about a movement that has considerable roots in Austria, and that at this time is advocating for the national liberation of the Jewish people in their historic homeland. Is there an active push among members to eventually move as well, or does that not start until much later, after the Balfour Declaration?
I don't have evidence for when exactly it started, but you see, what was also very eminent is that even in the first months of the war in 1914, there came tens and hundreds of thousands of refugees from the eastern part, from Galicia, to Vienna, because this part was lost to the Russians. And of course, these were young people. Many of them were young people, or they grew up in Vienna. They really had to fight even more because they were refugees and they were Jewish, and they maybe spoke another language, or German not so well. And so, but they created this new part of the Jewish community of Vienna. So, I mean, and it was not always easy for them also inside of the community, because as a phenomenon, a general phenomenon of assimilation is that the ones who are already there, or they're in second generation, are very strongly against those who just come in new, because they lose their how to say, they would be less esteemed by these newcomers here.
Yeah. So among the three wings of Jews in Vienna at the time, we have Hakoach emerging as a, fair to say, an empowerment movement.
Yes,
among younger Jews?
of course. No, what is so fascinating? You see, we have many pictures from those times. You see young people; they are laughing, they have fun, they stick together, they go swimming in summer, and they are in bus trousers, which is also quite new for the Jews, you know, in this time. And that young people and girls, especially, run around with swimming suits.
Yeah.
That was not very much welcomed for their parents, especially. So it was. Even among the Jewish community, a kind of emancipation of the young generation, because they want, yes, we are young and we are free and we want to have fun. And fun was not going to parties or drinking alcohol. It was to have sports and then to meet with friends and to dream about the coming state of Israel, so to say.
Yeah. So before the famous West Ham game, Hakoach gets promoted to the first league in Austria, which at that time is almost all teams from Vienna, correct?
Yes, of course, because how to say it was in those times not so easy to go to Graz or to Innsbruck and to play there. It took much longer than today. And maybe even there, you know, these towns, these local, provincial capital towns were much smaller and didn't have the infrastructure for football games. Or maybe they had the same problems in Vienna only 20, 30 years later to have this switch of generations.
Mm-hmm. The West Ham game
yes,
comes about because Hakoach is so far up in the table that they get to play in Europe. Does the set of players that comes in from Budapest provide a certain boost to the club, or is this the result of long building, or are the other clubs too weak? How does the team rise to eventually becoming vice champions?
Well, I think that was quite revolutionary in these times, that you import players from not only from another team, but also from another country, from a neighboring country in that case. But you see, all this is also have larger circumstances, because there are two very eminent persons for Hakoach. Well, the first one is Arthur Bahr. Arthur Bahr was the trainer and the president of the football section and everything. He had a shop for sports items, for footballs and all you need, all these sport utensils. And he was probably also the main sponsor for the football club. It was his life. His life was football, so to say. And you see him on the very early pictures from 1909, and he is in Vienna until 1938, and then he could escape to Palestine, and there he created after the war, or let's say he gathered the other Hakoah veterans, and he created the club Brit Hakoah 1909 in Ramat Gan, and so there it lived on. And then they had an alumni meetings, many of them. So the old Viennese Hakoah group met there in Ramat Gan. And so, but he's very eminent. But also the other person, of course, is Hugo Meisel. Hugo Meisel was the leader of the team, of the Austrian team, of the Austrian national team. I mean, as his official title was something like the union's president, the football union's president, Verbandskapitän. And he kind of created the Mitropa Cup. And the Mitropa Cup was the Middle European football cup. Was, so to say, something, the very early beginning of the Champions League.
Yeah, it's like a local Champions League, yeah.
Yes, because it was Budapest, Prague, and Vienna. Of course, it was also the towns of the former Habsburg Empire, and it was the towns who had a large Jewish community. And but okay, this was football, and so he really started to play football on a European level. And then, of course, you came in contact with other teams, and maybe they say, oh, this player is good, we want to buy him, and you offer him money. And so that's, yeah, but you see, this is how Hakoach came up, but this was also the reason for the downfall, because then in 1926 and in 1927 they made large tours to the United States, They played football against other teams. This, of course, was sponsored by a Zionist organization because Hakoach Vienna was so prominent that you even could sell them to United States. They are great pictures because they had a kind of uniformed look, when they appeared in public also as a team, they had a sponsor for that. And so they there in the United States, they lost some of their best members, their best players. And you see, and then they could not, and they never, yeah.
Yeah, we'll get to the America tour. That's a fascinating story in and of itself. Basically, what happened to significant players from the team just stay there and get bought up by American clubs. So eventually the professionalization of football, which Hakoach is a kind of a pioneer of, also then eats up half of the successful team later on. But I was going to stop here briefly in these times. Around 1923 is when the West Ham game is, and international headlines are made. Around this time, Austrian football professionalizes. The first professional league begins. Isn't Austria a bit early in that process compared to other European countries?
It looks like. Well, you see, I don't know too much about how it was in France. So in Italy, of course, they were playing a lot of football. And but yes, it was. And let's say it was quite successful for that it was such a small country.
The Danube football of that area, referring either to a style of play or just referring to that context of here's all these capitals arising from the Empire, Prague, Budapest, Vienna, playing very successful and remarkably well organized professional football. 1925 is the championship.
Yes.
There's a picture that I have here with players at half blue and white jerseys, a number of what looks like sponsors or bosses around them, and the Hakoach flag behind them. You already mentioned one of these sponsors, the guy with the football shop. Who else other than the players makes this championship possible? Is there a coach who sticks out? Is there?
Yeah, like I mentioned before, Arthur Barr was the coach and of the Hakoach football team. So he was very much devoted to the team, and then he was the one who bought the players from MTK Budapest. About other sponsors, I don't know. I mean, probably there were some wealthy businessmen, but you see, we don't know too much about the structure of the bureaucratical structure of Hakoach, because until now there is the book about the Hakoach, the ultimate book is not written, and you see that we had an American scholar, Bill Bowman, I think was his name. He appeared several times. He said, yes, where is the archive of the Hakoach team? I said, come on. I'm sorry, it does not exist anymore, not as far as I know. If it's not here in Vienna and it's not there in Ramat Gan, then it doesn't exist. But think, it was a football club. Why the hell should they have an archive? You see, it was a daily business. It was that looking to the future. The next game is important and not the ones behind. And so the only archive I found is in Ramat Gan, which is kind of scary because they just took the papers they had on the table, and then you find the plans for September 1938 for the Jewish sports championships in September 1938, which of course never took place.
Never happened. Yeah.
Never happened. Yeah.
I was with the historian. You mentioned William Bauman. Deserves a shout out here for sure. The article is from 2011 in the journal Central European History. It's free though, and I'm linking it in the show notes. The title is Hakoach Vienna and the International Nature of Interwar Austrian Sports. If you are somebody who didn't read or speak German, which most of you are, this is the English-speaking landing place, I think, for you to go to. So it's a very well-researched piece, and we'll link it in the show notes here. William Bauman is the man.
see, what is an interesting story is, but this is also only rumors. You see, Hakoach had its headquarters nearby the Danube in the Freudenau, we call this part of Vienna. And in the Inundationsgebiet, you said in this old German, which means it was an area that could be flooded when the Danube had too much water.
It's a flooding plain, yeah.
It was a flooding zone, so to say. And there they had a little house and all the cups in there. And then in 1938, when the Nazis came, the legend goes that, of course, the Nazis looted all these cups, but then there were some wealthy people who bought them out from the Nazis and brought them to Palestine. And now all of them, they are there in the Ramat Gan Jewish Sports Museum, and also the cup of the winning of the Austrian Championship in 1925 is there in Ramat Gan. It's still there. Yes, it exists.
The actual trophy now stands in Ramat Gan in Israel.
Yes, with all other many eminent cups. Yeah.
Do we know, to go back to the championship year, do we know some other biographies of players at the time? Are there maybe one or two names that you think stand out among these men?
Yeah, the outstanding player of the Hakoach team was Bela Guttman. He came from MTK Budapest, and then he stayed in the USA after this tourney, even the first one in 1926, because he really was an outstanding figure. And after World War II, he became also a very successful trainer of football teams, among them Real Madrid. And but you see, with sports is also when I made my little exhibitions on Hakoach, I said, wow, this will be a big success because people like sports. They will come and be interested. No, not at all. Because the sportsman from 80 years ago, nobody remembers his name. You see, there was a guy called Iso Gansel. Yeah, he was the hero of the first Hakoach team, that came up to the first legion, but then he disappears. I don't know what happened to him. Maybe he was injured, or maybe he went somewhere else. I don't know. So there was Moschkatz Häusler. He was kind, and you see him on many pictures. Yeah. But you see, you really would have to go through the newspapers of that times to see who is highly esteemed. Yeah, there was Max Gold. Max Gold was also quite famous, I think, and he died somewhere in 1940 in the Baltic states. We don't know exactly what happened. And yes, but I mean, from the Hakoach sports, the women, the most famous one was Hedi Bienenfeld, because she was a very pretty woman and she was an Austrian champion in swimming, and she was also a model, and she was you can see her in pictures, and she was married to Gigo Wertheimer, who was also the trainer of the swimming team and also a kind of universal sportsman. He also participated in other sections, and they were the kind of the Jewish dream couple of Vienna, and they were fancy and they were pretty. And once there is something very interesting story, because you see, one of the very famous swimmers of that time was Arne Borg, and he was a Swedish guy, tall and blonde and blue-eyed. He was the perfect Aryan, so to say, and he came to Vienna to a swimming meeting with Hakoach. He came to meet the Jewish swimmers, and there were many pictures also with Hugo Meisels. The four together were going through Vienna in a car, and they really showed this is the Jewish power in sports. And we have this Swedish guy here who is our good friend, and so this I mean, so it, and Hakoach also, they had balls, they were for dancing once a year. So this was also a very important social point. And for the veterans, for the elder ones, they had the touristic sections. They went for hiking in the mountains. But you want to talk about football?
No, that's a great story. It highlights that the club is a multi-sports club still, and that its footballers aren't the only players that are famous at the time. Yeah.
No, it was. I mean, of course, it was the young ladies who were swimming. Of course, they were. There was much interest in them.
Yes. Yeah. Alexander Neufeld is a player whose biography is at least partially as well documented. He went under a different name in Hungary, was also one of these players, then bought to Vienna, and then also stayed in the US, coached and played in New York, and later on became coach of Hapoel Tel Aviv as well. Yeah. So they become champions. Allegedly, the goalkeeper who has his arm injured runs back on the field as a forward and scores a goal. At least that's what Friedrich Thorberg, who also wrote this mythical poem about Matthias Sindelar, tells us. So legends shroud this championship. I don't know if you know anything about what really happened there and if that is how things went down, but it's quite an achievement.
Yeah, well, of course, Friedrich Thorberg was he was a water ball player in his youth. He was with Hagibor Prague. He even was a Czech champion. He lived in Prague before he moved to Vienna. And yes, of course, he was the one person after the World War II that how to say kept these legends alive, and who went on telling them. He was sending many letters around the world, and so also he created some of these Hakoah myths, and he describes. Many stories. He said, yes, the most brutal game in Vienna was when Hakoach played against Austria, because then it was a fight inside of the Jewish community, who is the leader and who is stronger and who is better. And
as you said, the Zionist club of youth empowerment against Austria as a symbol for a more assimilated and bourgeois Jewry.
Absolutely.
In Vienna.
Yeah.
So they become champions. And then they travel to the US. Now, we have to say, this sounds strange now, but this was quite common during that period. So for bigger European clubs to go on tours to other parts of the world or other part of the continent. For one, it made publicity, and it was a way to earn money. In the case that we're talking about here, it was also a way to lose a lot of your players. What do we know about this America journey? How does it come about? Where do they stop?
Well, I think they mainly played in New York and at the East Coast, I would say. There was not so much interest on football on the West Coast.
I have one report from a game in St. Louis in 1926. We might get to that a little bit later, but that led to some conflicts in the St. Louis, Missouri Jewish community.
Okay.
To have to sign.
I don't know too much about this American tour. We just have wonderful pictures of that in our collection in the Jewish Museum. So,
how many players do they lose?
The best ones.
The best ones. Yeah.
It's not the number; it's the quality.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly. You see, we have no full evidence of what happened exactly then. I mean, it's just some memories, but it's mainly Arthur Barr himself who later on created the book of 50 years of Hakoach, but he was not a big writer and not a historian, and many things are more personal than how to say that they would give many informations. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. The St. Louis game is something that I came across in part because it offers an interesting contrast on another split within the Jewish community. At the time, most of St. Louis's Jews are conservative or Orthodox. And when Hakoach arrives in town to play a kind of a St. Louis all-star team, the game is scheduled for a Saturday.
Nice.
So, yes, so you have that conflict. You have the accusation from Orthodox Jews that this tour is, quote, intended to break down not only the religious but also the Jewish national spirit of Jews in America. So the club is perceived as a threat almost.
Absolutely.
When they play there, the game happens. There's like 7,000 people in St. Louis, which is a high number at that time. Game goes on, and the New York Times reported on it. and said that the club from Vienna played a machine-like short passing game. Sounds like tiki taka.
Tiki taka, yeah.
So something for Americans. Yeah.
Well, you see, we don't know exactly how they played in these times, but we know that the British played kick and rush, and of course what is the Viennese culture of football, which is maybe a more Danube football, as you called it, is with short passing and dribbling, as we would say. But coming back to to this religious community, I mean, from their point of view, of course, it's understandable, because people should only admire God. They should not admire other people and put them in the same position. I mean, so from the religious point of view, and people should assemble only to praise God, and not to go to football stadiums, right, and to how to shout and scream and behave like apes, and
yeah.
You see what I mean?
Mm-hmm. As a columnist in the Jewish Record at the time, who after the game is over, writes this ironic column, kind of making fun of St. Louis Jews for being so skeptical of the visit. And he writes, now the Shabbos Goyim are gone. This is now the Shabbos Goyim are gone. The atmosphere has returned to its normal kosher self. All is well again. Nothing to complain about. God bless the righteous. Amen.
The thunderstorm passed away.
They stirred the religious pot in St. Louis, Missouri. The Austrian champions at the time. Most of its players that they lost, however, were lost to New York teams. I think you said that's where they played most of their games, right?
Yes, I think so. Yeah, let's say on the East Coast, because they also had the largest Jewish communities there, so it is quite logical.
Yeah, I mean, it's the high point of the football section of the club. I think it's fair to say that championship, and then the fame that comes for the tours. New York area teams that bought players from Hakoah include the New York Giants, not the American football team. There's a New York Giants, a soccer team as well. The Brooklyn Wanderers.
Now when you mention it, I remember that.
Yeah. And the loss of all these players, of course, means sporting success is down, right?
That's the point. I think then they had to go back to the second division, and they never retired from. But maybe also the enthusiasm was gone a little bit after this big success, this very unexpected success, and then you don't have big names anymore, and no big successes, and but it was
Before the Anschluss, the joining of Germany and Austria has its own fascist dictatorship for a few years.
Yes.
How is the club doing during those years?
Well, you see, the Austrian fascist regime was not openly anti-Semitic, because it wanted to present itself as the kind of better German state. I mean, German, but not like the Nazis. But of course, there was lots of undercover anti-Semitism. For instance, like all the Jewish medical doctors were expelled from public institutions like hospitals and university and so on. So what happened in sports? For instance, the swimming championship had to take place in Krems in Lower Austria. And as we know here, Krems has a very long anti-Semitic tradition because it's very old. It's a medieval town already. And especially there in these very old towns, the German nationalist says, yes, this is our grounds, and we were here forever. And so that it was and you see the swimming championship, of course, took place in the Danube in Vienna, and then everywhere else. The Olympic Games took place in the open sea or in the harbor or something.
It reminds me of this year's Olympic Games, right? The attempts in Paris.
Yes, yeah. That's tradition. That's tradition. I mean, and so it was for the Jewish swimmers. It was very unpleasant to go to Krems, and because the crowd was very much against them, and they booed on them, and so it was a very hostile atmosphere. And football went on, and of course it was still possible for Jewish people to have sports. It was not like in the Nazi times when they were expelled completely from all the public places. But it became more and more unpleasant every day.
March 7th, 1938, Hakoach draws against the Sport Club of the Tramway Workers in Vienna. They begin training for the next game, but that will never happen. These March days are the days when the German army is greeted in Austria by the population, and Austria joins Hitler's Germany. The club is extinguished, ended. I don't know how we should put it. Just a day or a few days after that, right?
Yes, of course. You see that there were atrocities against the Jewish populations in Austria for many weeks until the fall of. There was also then later on the destruction of the synagogues in November 38. But you see what is quite interesting, that only a very small number of Hakoach sportsmen and women were murdered in the concentration camps. When I was in Ramat Gan in the museum, there is also a Yitzko book. This is the Jewish communities. They have books for the names of the dead people, and when they have to when they have to escape and get expelled, they take the book with so they take symbolically they take the deads with them. And so these books are very important, and because and there is a kind of this memoration book for the murdered sportsmen, and in Austria it was only 11 or 12. And I ask myself, how can this happen? Yeah. And I think that there is only so few. And I think the explanation is, first of all, they were Zionists, which means they were trained all of their life to go away, to go to Palestine and to become a farmer and to grow the land there and to have children and to make a new community.
And they did.
And they did, and of course, when you are young, you're free and easy to go into the world. You have nothing to lose. When you're old, when you're 60, when you're grandfather, and you have your grandchildren, and maybe your library and your living room, you don't want to run away. You see, and so it was maybe only a few veterans who did not want to leave Vienna. And the next point is because it was a sports club, it was very well internationally connected. They had friends everywhere. Other sports club, or from these tours they made, they knew people, and so it was kind of easy for them to escape from Austria. You see, the largest number probably, of course, went to Palestine, like I mentioned before in Ramat Gan. There was a new center of the Hakoach. Most of the swimming section went to Great Britain. They even had their magazine on their own in exile there during the war, and also after. Only the swimming section. Some of them, of course, went to United States, which was the main land for the refugees, for Jewish refugees from Europe. But you see, there are also in the publications of the times after the war, you see long lists of people around the world, Hakoach veterans, and they were printing this list so that you can find your friends and start the contact again. So yes, in this sports helps you surviving. I mean, you could also see it this way.
Yeah. And it makes sense that a lot of these, a lot of the young people in this context, when the time comes, memorize what they've always been told. Eventually, you're meant to go build a Jewish nation. So you don't have to put up with this anymore. Many of them flee, as you said, to Palestine.
You see, most of the Zionists even left Austria. See, Teddy Kollek left Austria in 1935. Yes. Yeah. Because he realized that there is no future here for Jewish people, and as they were Zionists, of course, they went there. And they didn't wait, especially the young people. They did not wait until the very end. It was mainly the old people who, were in another situation of life.
You should mention it. Among those killed by the Nazis is Max Scheuer, captain of the championship-winning team. For those who make it out, they found a new club, Hakoach Tel Aviv. Is that right?
No, it was Ramat Gan. Ramat Gan then was, not part of Tel Aviv, because it was a kind of suburb that later on grew together. I mean, of course, today it's the greater Tel Aviv, if you want. But no, they said Ramat Gan. It's the center, yeah.
The club's colors are purple.
Yes.
Do you know why that is? I mean, I have one version of the story here.
Please tell me.
You know it, you tell us.
And maybe the guy was from Austria, or it was I don't know. Please tell me the story.
The Austria Vienna, the club donated quite a bit of equipment, and so because Austria's colors are purple and white.
That's it. So this
you've
story
heard that too, right?
Well.
That's the one version
from Barbara during the football exhibition. Yeah, she told that story. Yeah.
There should be a friendly between Austria and Hakoah Ramat Gan. I don't know if there's any contacts there anymore, but the colors are still purple to this day.
I tell you another story. When I was there in Ramat Gan in the 2008 or something, there was one of the very old veterans from kind of after the war was still living, and she was yelling against the section in Vienna. So because they were not in good contact, so for two reasons. Because first of all, after the war, Hakoach Vienna, well, let's start like this. After World War II, Hakoach Vienna was one of the very first Jewish clubs at all to be recreated, because it was needed for the young people. It was needed because they spoke different languages from Eastern European countries, and they need to have an occupation, and so it was recreated. But the kind of important figure in the background was Karl Haber, and Karl Haber then was a member of the Communist Party, which was very popular among Jews because they liberated the Auschwitz concentration camp.
Yes,
and then of course the guys in Ramat Gan were still Zionists, so that they had this political clash, and then later on Hakoach, the Vienna part, asked them, we want to have these cups back because all these cups are ours. We want them here in Vienna, not in Ramat Gan. And of course, this was a casus belli. I mean, this was like they declared war on them because these cups then had to stay in Israel, and so, but this is also another anecdote that, and in today, I mean, this Hakoach in the group in Ramat Gan does not exist anymore. There it is. There you have the Maccabi sports field, so to say. It's the international Maccabi organization, but of course, there in the museum, the big part of the collection is the cups and the golden book of Hakoach, the Golden Book of Hakoach. It's big like this,
Yeah.
And but it was created at the beginning of World War I, and they wanted to have, the all the heroes that died in the war. They wanted to write in there, but the first page is written, the second half, and then the rest of the book is empty because maybe then there were too many names. They could not count them anymore, or they lost interest, or they had to do other. You see this enthusiasm of the first days of war quickly went away, and then people became more realistic. Yeah.
Yeah. The club itself is reactivated. The football section never follows up on its successes from the time between the wars and eventually folds. Around 6,000 Jews are left in Vienna when the Red Army enters the city. So a significant, just numerically, number of the community is gone. Have there been attempts to revive the football section again, or?
Well, immediately after the war in 46 and 47, there was a Hakoach football team, but you see then there were still many displaced persons in Austria, which were the survivors of the concentration camps. But after the founding of Israel in 1948, most of them went to Israel. And so then there was the next threat for the Jewish community, to disappear. I mean, in the 1950s and 1960s, nobody really believed that this Jewish community in Vienna would live on. And today we have a Jewish football team. Its name is Maccabi, but also they're not only Jewish players there. This wouldn't be possible, to play on a higher level or so on, because they're just this very little number of Jewish people here in Vienna, and then you need to be interested in sports and so on, especially in football. So this is not possible anymore.
All right. Okay. Maybe you should say briefly something about the location of the club. You already mentioned the original place and it then being given back to the club. For its first years, when it comes to football, it seems like the club is wandering around. So sometimes they play in Vienna Stadium, sometimes they play in the north of the city on the other side of the Danube, until eventually they settle in the Kriau area. Is that the same property that is now the clubs as well?
Yes, like I mentioned before, in the Hakoach was in the outskirts of the Wiener Prater, which is a kind of little forest in the along the Danube. And all these grounds were taken. I mean, these grounds were rented, and it was taken away. It was stolen, looted by the Nazis. And then, it was only a rent, but after some decades, and now in the early 2000 years, the Hakoach campus was recreated, also because the old people's home was built there. A completely new building was established there, and next to it there is the Hakoah playgrounds, and there you have tennis and gymnastics and swimming again, of course, and indoor and outdoor sports. And of course, also this is open to the public. I mean, they couldn't survive only with Jewish members, and so it's just a kind of normal sports club where you can go and have your training. And at the moment, they're also suffering from the war in Israel and the situation there, because people are afraid to go to a Jewish institution because they're afraid of attacks or whatever.
Yeah. The same in Germany and many other parts of Europe too. Yeah. You probably know, but the Hakoach became somewhat famous 2006 when Franklin Foer wrote about it in his book How Football Explains the World. I think that's been translated into German as well. And I don't know exactly how he came across the club, but there's a one chapter in there that features the story of the 1930s chiefly. So rise and fall.
Well, let's say I kind of created this Hakoach collection in the Jewish Museum because I made 2 exhibitions on Jewish sports, on Hakoach and on the Maccabi games. And I think this part of our collection is the one where the most people ask for it. I mean, the sports, because they were so extremely successful, and this was really a boost for the Jewish evolution, if you want to say it like this, in these times, that this still is a phenomenon. And it, like I mentioned before, it's the Jews are not praying, are not old men praying in a synagogue. No, it's young boys and girls and going out and doing sports and want to create a new future. Yeah.
And they're strong, and they're physically strong, and they're not victims.
Absolutely.
Right? That's the public statement.
This, of course, as you mentioned it, because the anti-Semites always called the Jews weak and of lower
physically weak, right? Bent back, small, thin, frail, that kind of caricature of the Jewish.
And so it was quite something. What is also in that there was a figure, Sische Breitbart. I don't know if you've heard about him. He was from Poland, and he died in 1925, and he was how to say, bowing irons.
Bending iron, okay.
Bearing irons, yes. He was a circus figure, but he came up like a Roman centurion, with horses and so on, and with a and so this was also this kind of strongman myth. He was a kind of modern Samson, if you want, and he was a hero. He was. There's also in one of Werner Herzog films, he's a figure, but he put it to the Nazi times, which is not really historical. But the strong man, the new Jew, so to say. There was this. Was very important then, and this Hakoach was the fulfillment of this dream, so to say. Yeah.
Yes. I want to mention briefly that the Jewish Museum in Vienna also hosted a wonderful exhibit that was on, I think, until January or so this year. It was called the Super Jews. There is some online presence. You can look up some reports about it, and that exhibit focused not only on Jewish clubs per se, but also on clubs who claim some Jewish legacy. Do you want to briefly say how that was structured? And there may well be 1 or 2 more episodes in that as well.
Well, this exhibition had a historical part, and so it mentioned the Rothschild family, who kind of created the first Vienna football club. Hakoach was only a smaller part because the story of Hakoach we know. Then there was also a portrait of Mrs. Zwieback, who was the wife of a well-established businessman.
Yeah, so Zwieback is a kind of a crisp bread popular in Germany.
Well, if you translate the name.
That's not her real name, for those of you who've never heard the word Zwieback, yes.
No, I think it was her name.
What? Her last name was Zwieback?
Was Zwieback, yes.
I thought you were making a joke.
No, it's not a joke.
Okay,
I just don't remember the first name. But she created an Austrian women's football, championship, which was, of course, generally football was amateur and not professional sports then. Okay, then yes, as our director Barbara, she's a fan of Austria. There was, of course, a big section of Austria Wien, and their big successes in Europe in 1930. They won this European championship. But what was maybe even more important for these curators was the second part of the exhibition, which dealt with that non-Jewish fan groups took over a kind of Jewish identity. and the super Jews, I mean, is what the fans of Ajax Amsterdam, they call themselves the super Jews, of course, in Dutch.
Yep.
Because in the 1970s, I mean, their arch enemy was Feyenoord Rotterdam, and the fans of Feyenoord Rotterdam suddenly they started to wave Nazi flags and to call them Jews.
Yes,
and other things.
Well,
and
and wish them to certain places as well.
To certain places, yes.
The famous chant about Hamas and Jews into the gas was invented in Rotterdam.
Okay, I see.
Yeah.
And yes, and then the fans of Ajax said, okay, then we are the Jews, and they called them like this. And you had the Yid army at Tottenham Hotspurs. And so you had, but which is, of course, how to say, the taking over of an identity which is not yours, but as a phenomenon, as a cultural phenomenon of the present times, this is quite interesting.
Yeah, the appropriation of these identities. Yeah, very good, very good. At the risk of really oversimplifying things here, but is there a takeaway you think from Hakoach's interwar story that goes beyond the immediate and very obvious story of Jewish emancipation?
Well, of course, it's a question of emancipation. It's you have to go for your goals, and in sports, in life, everywhere, and then you will be successful. And it was nobody expected Hakoach to win a championship. I mean, 1 or 2 years before. But they did it. It's that you can make the impossible possible. Maybe this when you stick together and when you work as a team. And in football also the weaker can be the winner at the end if in this game he is better. Yeah. But
in football and in life.
And in life, yes. And that's how to say, new game, new good luck. That's what the gamblers say.
New game, new chance. Yeah.
New game, new chance. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. That's it. No, well, I mean the times are very different, especially from then to now. It's maybe. You see, our in most of our leagues we have immigrants who are the young players. I mean, this of course is a constant that in sports and in music, you have the possibility to come from very low and to go to really to the top. If you work hard, if you have talents and ambitions and many other things. And many times it's those who come from the lower you start, the higher you come sometimes, because these obstacles, they make you stronger or something like this. Yeah.
I know you're a historian, but thanks for wading into this question as well. It's not our specialty as historians to apply moral lessons, but I think you described it really well. Yeah. Anything about Hakoach that we forgot that you want to make sure we mention, or have we covered most of what's
I think we covered most of it. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, today they have a very nice campus there, and it's in the outskirts of Vienna, but it's nearby the Danube. Yeah. And it's nice to go there. And there is also a tiny museum there on the history of the club and so on. Which I helped to create, and it's just tiny, and it's the location is not, the room is not perfect for a museum, but yes, the best thing is to come to Vienna and to make an appointment with me, and then you can go to our archive, and you can see many images, many photos of the big successes of Hakoach Vienna in the 1920s,
right,
and so on. Yeah. It's we really have hundreds of photos, and most of them we don't know the persons on them, which of course is a pity. But if you don't, this is the lesson for today. Always when you have pictures, write the names on the backside, because otherwise the people will. Well, you remember them, but people after you they will don't know anything. So
yes,
if you want to keep these people alive, write their names on the pictures.
Yes, thank you from all historians worldwide.
But we still have many pictures with the names written on them.
Yes, and that's
so
how we know
this is especially the football photos. Hakoah, he left us. His granddaughter is still alive and lives in Vienna, and she donated to the museum lots of these photo albums from her grandfather. And so we do have lots of evidence on who were the players then and how they looked alike, and you see them on the field and you see them backstage, in fancy dress and so on. So it's a world to discover. And still, like I said before, the big book of the Hakoah history is not written yet. So if you're a student and you want to get famous, you have to write on Hakoah. Yes,
there's a dissertation project waiting for somebody out there for sure. Yeah,
let's hope so.
Thank you so much for taking the time and sharing.
Thank you very much. It was nice talking to you. If you have another topic, we can be back in a year or so.
All right. Yes. Yeah, we'll do. And greetings to Vienna. Be well, Marcus.
Yes. And be well. You too. Bye.